I was recently asked if I would make a piano cake for a 70th birthday. I was given a photo of the birthday man sat at his piano, and the task was to make a piano that stands up just like a normal piano and isn't flat on a board like a cake, and to also make an edible figure. I'm going to break down how I made the structure so you could make it if you wanted to. I'm going to show you how I made the cake just like I always do, but in this video I'm also going to show you how I came up with the price for this cake and the breakdown of it. Some people find pricing difficult, some people find it a little bit awkward or controversial, so I'm going to explain how I came up with my pricing for this one, and maybe you guys will find it helpful. So stick around, see how it's all done, and drop me a comment to let me know what you thought. Okay, I need to build a structure to support the cake so that the piano is actually on legs. So I'm going to use threaded rods for that, which means I'm using plywood, and I've cut that with a jigsaw to an 18-inch square, and I'm going to cover it with this white contact paper which I just got from Amazon. The next thing that I did was cut another piece of board for the support of the cake, and I've cut that into the shape of the cake, which is obviously the shape of a piano. So this is a masonite cake board. These masonite cake boards, they're bought from cake supply stores, but they are actually plywood wrapped in contact paper, which is what I've just done myself. This one was 18 inch by 14 inch, and then I just drew out the shape of the piano on the board and then cut that with my jigsaw. These are only 5mm thick, so they're really easy to cut. And what I want to do is have the glossy black side of the masonite board where you would normally put your cake. I want that to be the underside, so that if you're looking under the piano, which I know most people won't do, but details people. So if you're looking under it, it'll be nice and black and it won't be like a horrible piece of wood. And then the top side would have been just paper, but I've covered it with foil to make it food safe, because I reckon the paper will just absorb oils from the cake. And then I've just drilled 3 holes where I want the rods to be, which will be the legs of the piano and the supports of the cake. I'm using 6mm threaded rod, which is what I prefer to use if I can, because it is a lot easier to cut with a hacksaw if you need to do it by yourself. And I want to position the piano diagonally on the board. Okay, so how do we put all of this together? So these little things that I'm showing you now are T-nuts. They are like a threaded insert that you hammer into your board, and you can then screw in your threaded rod without having to use a nut on the underside and a nut on the top. And basically what it means is your board can be almost flush on your work surface rather than having to step it up loads to avoid a nut scraping on your work surface. You need to drill a hole big enough to hold the threaded insert, so I'm using 6mm threaded rods, but the T-nut needs to be housed in an 8mm hole. Now, I did hammer them in the wrong side of the board the first time that I did it. See this little finger tap here? That's me working it out. So out it comes, and I'm going to flip the board over and hammer them back in on the right side this time. So if you're doing it properly, the little metal cross should be coming from the underside, and you should only see a hole from the top which you'll put your threaded rod into and screw that into the insert. You don't need to use these at all. You can use nuts, you can just use 2 nuts, one at the bottom, one at the top, tighten them together and it does the same job. I like these because they make the board flush with your work surface, and then all you need to do is put some little furniture pads on the underside of your board to stop the metal parts scraping on your work surface. If you use a nut underneath instead of a T-nut, you will need to put feet on the underside of your board, whether that is something that you buy or whether you then need to cut more wood and stick it to the board to step the whole thing up to make room for that nut. That's why I like the T-nuts. Anyway, moving on from the long-winded explanation of T-nuts, I'm just putting a 6mm washer onto the threaded rod, and I'll tighten that down with a 6mm nut. So these threaded rods are 5 inches long. All of them have been cut to 5 inches, and the next thing we're going to do is drop down a 6mm nut to the height that we want the cake card to sit, basically where we want the piano base to be. and that's going to be where the cake is going to sit on top. So I decided on 3 inches above the board. Once you know how high you want the base to sit above the board, you should take your ruler and measure that up for each nut. So each nut needs to be level and needs to be the same height on the rod, and putting your baseboard on the rods can help you to see where it sits on the ruler. The next thing I wanted to do was make the piano lid, because I wanted it to be the right shape. And the way that I did that was to use the baseboard as my template. That way I know that the curve of the piano lid is going to match the curve of the piano. You can use scissors to cut this if you just wanted to draw around it, but because this has got foam inside, the scissors tend to squash the foam and it's harder, it kind of warps. It's much easier if you use a knife. So I'll just neaten along the edge that I've just cut so that it's nice and smooth, and then I'll remove that from the larger A1 size piece of foam that I bought. Now that I've got my template for the lid, and I'm also going to use that to cut the cake to shape, I'm just going to put my baseboard back on the threaded rods and tighten that in place. So that will sit on top of a nut, a washer, the baseboard will go on them, and then we'll put another washer and tighten that down with a nut, and we'll tighten the 2 nuts towards each other, and that will make everything really secure. Here now you can see those metal parts on the underside of the board, and you can see that I'm adding some little rubber furniture pads on the underside of the board, and that will lift it up just a little bit and it will stop the T-nuts from marking my work surface. So my plan for this foam board that I've cut to the shape of the piano is to use it to cut the shape of the cake, because it's a large slab. Obviously I've not baked it in the shape of a piano, so this will be my template to cut the layer for the piano itself, and then I will cut it down and make that the piano lid. So I'm just removing that piece and I'll put that on top of my template, and that will allow me to split the layers and put it onto my structure, and then layer it up with buttercream. And once I've layered it up with buttercream, I will cover the whole cake in milk chocolate ganache. So the next thing that I'm going to do after I've got my 2 bottom layers is I'm going to cut the top layer, so that needs to be stepped back a little bit. So we're working bottom up here, obviously we need to layer from the bottom up, so what we need to do is leave space for where I'm going to put the piano keys, because behind the piano keys the cake then gets taller, or the piano gets taller. The keys come out towards you, your hands would go on the keys, and then you've got like a little wall behind the keys, and that is sort of like the housing for all the insides of the piano, and then the lid is propped up behind that, and that's why your lid and the foam core card that I've got is going to be slightly smaller than the template shape that I've got right now. So very basic, all I've done is I've got my phone, I've got a picture of a piano on the phone, so I've just gauged where I want the keys to stop, I've marked on my foam, and then I've put that on my big cutting mat, and I'll just cut in a straight line all the way across, and that will now be my lid. I will actually use this piece, cover it in paste, and that will become my lid, but for now I'm also using it as my template for my top 2 layers of cake. So I will put that on top of the slab, I'll cut round it, that will be set aside, I'll layer it up with the buttercream as before, and I will pop those 2 layers on top of the cake that I've already got. I split this into 2 again and layered it up with buttercream, of course. I just wanted thin layers on this cake because if it was too tall the proportions wouldn't look right for a piano. So yep, the smaller layers go on top, and now we have a 4-layer chocolate piano cake. Okay, next up I'm just going to coat the whole cake in milk chocolate ganache. And while you're watching me do that, as promised, I'm going to tell you what I charged for this cake, and I'll break down how I got to that price. So this one I charged £265 for. That's not just for the cake, that's also for the edible figure which I made by hand. Let's break that down then. So the hours involved in this cake were 8 hours start to finish for the structure of the cake, all of that. I charge £15 an hour at the moment. The cost to me for all of the edible parts, from cake to sugar paste and glaze and all that stuff, is about £70. This is a really large cake and that's why the cost is so high, but generally costs are really high for cake supplies at the moment. The structure side of things, I've estimated about £10 for wood, contact paper, fixings, threaded rods, because I buy these in bigger quantities and then cut them down. And then other than that, I made some edible prints. There's a cost involved there with the sheet. I'm going to interrupt myself briefly just to explain what I'm doing next before I carry on with my pricing chat. So I've completely coated the cake in milk chocolate ganache, and now I'm going to start covering it with the paste. So I've put some white sugar paste on here for the keys, and then I'm going to mark indentations along the white sugar paste and make them look like individual piano keys. So I'm using my steel rule for this. Obviously make sure it's nice and clean before I start using it for any of this stuff. But I'm marking along about 1 centimetre per key. Once I've marked it with my Dresden tool, I'm going to push the ruler down into the paste to make the indentation for the keys, because the ruler is steel and it's about the right thickness to push down, and it will leave a nice straight line to make it look nice and uniform. Okay, so I'll just get back to breaking down that cost for you. So that covers the cake. Now for the model. I charge £50 for a detailed model, and the breakdown of that is about 3.5 hours spent making the model, and about, for this one, a half a kilogram of paste, which adds up to about £6 odds, because I buy these in 250g packs at £3.35 a pack, pre-dyed coloured Saracino modelling paste. So adding everything together, I get about £255, which leaves me £10 profit on this cake. So if you are running a business, then you want to be adding on a percentage of profit to each order for your business. So that is that would allow you to keep your business going, to grow your business. And as you can tell, I'm not very good at this. £10 on a £265 order is 0.04% profit. That's my bad. I need to be a little bit better at that. But yeah, that's my open and honest breakdown of the pricing that I charged for this cake and the cost to me and all the bits and bobs. I'm sorry if it's rambled on a little bit and you didn't find this interesting. If you did find this interesting, then let me know, and maybe I can give you some more details on future cakes and how much it cost me and how long it took me and all of that sort of stuff. And if you find any of this stuff useful, from the pricing to the how-tos to just the entertainment value of seeing someone make a cake, then please subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. I would really like to grow the channel and incorporate that into my business plan, YouTube, you know. So all my subscribers make a difference. When you watch a video all the way through, it makes a huge difference. So yeah, I'll just take a little second to say thank you for that. And if you're not already subscribed, then please do so. So back to the cake. I've rolled out a little bit of that black couture sugar paste, and I've just laid that on top of the area above the piano keys, and I'll just cut that in a straight line. I'm going to add some more pieces to that, so it doesn't need to be perfect. I'm rolling out another big thick piece to cover around the sides of the piano, and then I'm just cutting some thicker pieces to go along the side panels of the piano on each side. I've now mixed up some white sugar paste with a soft caramel colour, and that is going to be like the inside of the piano, and I will dust and paint that up later. And I've put a thick black sort of rim around the whole edge of the piano, and it's just to give the look that the inside piece is actually inside and not flat on top. So now I've just cut the black piano keys, so I've rolled the same black couture sugar paste. It's not modelling paste, but I've just rolled it quite thick. I've not continued to roll it thin, and I've got pictures in front of me that I'm working with, and I'm just placing the piano keys in the pattern that I can see on the photo in front of me. So now I'm just working on the legs of the piano. I've got little sort of discs that I've rolled out. They're sort of like frisbees or something, because they're not completely flat, and then I'll just cut sort of like a radius of that so that it can wrap around the rod, and then I'll just wrap some black paste around the rods as well, and those are the legs. It's as simple as that. I have now got my piano lid, which I cut earlier, that white foam core card, so I've got that to hand just so that I know how big a piece to roll out to cover it. Once I've rolled out my piece nice and thin and it's the right size, I've painted piping gel all over the foam core card lid because it won't stick otherwise. Like, I just find anything else is going to be really difficult to get it to stick, like edible glue, water. Piping gel is much better for this. So I'm just leaving that to dry a little bit, and then I will just do the same on the other side. So I have left this overnight and I'm coming back to it in the morning. So all the major stuff is done, but I'm just going to add some details. And if you're doing things like this, sometimes it is better to leave it a few hours, or if you can leave it overnight, and it means that the sugar paste is just going to be a bit less soft. So if you need to add anything to it, or maybe if you want to paint like a message on it or anything like that, then it's not going to damage any of the work that you've already done. So I've made some edible prints of little songbooks and sheet music to sit on top of the piano, and I'm just cutting that out with my ruler, and I'll just set them aside, and then they will be added onto the piano as decoration when it's done. Then I needed to make a little stand to hold the sheet music, so I tried a few different ways, but basically what I did was I got some modelling paste this time because I wanted it to set a little bit firmer than the sugar paste. I rolled out a thick sausage of paste to begin with, and then I used my smoother, the hard smoother, and pushed down so that it created a sort of right angle, and then I just reinforced that and smoothed it out and cut it so it's a bit sharper. And then I just rolled out a little sort of I don't really know, it's like a rounded rectangle. I wanted to make sure it wasn't too long so it didn't flop, and I just set that aside to dry and firm up as I was working on other things. Then I hand painted a little banner. The customer wanted a banner to say happy birthday, so I just rolled out some black modelling paste and then painted with antique gold luster dust and dipping solution. I painted the message on there. I really went back and forward on whether to draw in any detail on this beige part of the piano for the inside. I don't know what it's called, I'm sorry. I'm really glad that I did it in the end, but I was really nervous about it because I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to do anything neat enough and replicate the huge amount of detail that is in the inside of this piano for the amount of time that I've got left on this cake. But I think the little bit of detail that I put on made a big difference, and I think it made the piano look a lot more impressive. So all I did was I had my picture on my phone the whole time, and I was just looking at little details that I could replicate. So I got my circle cutters and just impressed little circles, different sizes to match what I saw in the photo, and I marked on the beige sugar paste where there were pieces of wood that were within the inside of the piano, and I just rolled out thin pieces of sugar paste and laid them across where I'd put the markings to look a little bit like the wooden panels inside. I then dusted the whole thing with my edible dusts. So I'm mostly using Squirrel Brown here. It's a fractal Squirrel Brown, but I also went back with a little bit of dark chocolate and some dark khaki. Just like dark chocolate in areas where there are shadows, a little bit dark khaki in the sort of middle area because there was little highlights and bits. I added some dipping solution. This is what I'm adding here. It's just to blend the colours a little bit more so it's not so harsh. And now I'm going back with the edible fractal pens, and I'm trying to draw in the lines and the chords. I mean, there's so many and there's so many details. Like, it could have been amazing if I spent hours and hours on it, but I didn't have hours and hours on it, and not everyone wants to pay for hours and hours of that level of detail, so you've got to sort of make a judgment call. So I did what I thought would stand out the most and just give a little bit of detail. So I did the red because there was some red in the pictures I was looking at, and then I mixed up some antique silver luster dust with my dipping solution again. I've got these really amazing super fine brushes, and I was using my smoother as sort of like a ruler to try and keep the lines straight because those are supposed to be the chords within. It's not perfect, it's far from perfect, but I do think the detail that I've added makes it look better, and then the lid's going to go on top so you're not going to see every bit of that detail anyway. Once I was finished with the insides, I went back and just neatened up a few areas that were bugging me with my knife, and then I sprayed the whole of the black areas of the piano with edible confectioner's glaze, and that gives it that shine. Edible glaze on a cake is amazing. It can make such a difference to the detail that you're doing, whether it's eyes on a model or if you just want to make your cake look shiny. But if you've never used it before, then I would warn to cover all your surfaces. Like, I really did not want the glaze on my mat because it would have ruined the surface of it, and it's so hard to get it off. And don't have your phone nearby, because you will, even if it doesn't look like it, you will get little particles of glaze on your phone screen, and again, that is a nightmare to get off. So yep, I would be careful with your edible glaze. Last thing on the cake is just to put the piano lid on. So I took a big barbecue kebab skewer and just covered it with the black sugar paste. This needs to be sat at an angle, but you also need to make sure that you are putting it into the cake far enough in that it's going to rest on that board that the whole cake's sitting on, because if you put it too much of an angle, it could come right through the cake like I just did there. Check the angle of the lid and then decide how high the stick needs to be to support that angle, and to make sure that the stick is not going to just push all the way through your cake or fall over. Once I was happy with it, I sprayed it with some glaze, and I did just set this up at the venue. I didn't take this in the car with the lid on, it would have just fallen over and squashed the little stand that I had made for it. I haven't shown you how I've made the model in this one, but let me know in the comments if you'd like me to show you how I make my edible figures, if you'd like me to do a video on a figure from start to finish. So this is the photo that the customer sent me of her dad sitting at his piano, and this is sort of what I was trying to recreate. What do you think? Did I do a good enough job? Did it look enough like the picture for it to have hit the mark? Let me know what you think, and yeah, as I said earlier, please subscribe to the channel if you've not already, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching.